So here we are, Business Literacy, Module 4, Written Communication, and Part 3, Selected Generic Uses of Written Communication. As I said here, we are going to look at summaries, we are going to look at editing, and we are going to look at persuasive writing. A summary is also sometimes called a precis. So whether you make a precis or summarize the following piece of work, you know that you are dealing with the same thing. When we are summarizing work, we have to ask ourselves the following question: who will read it and how much detail do they need? Now, I believe sometimes you are just doing it for yourself. Maybe you are summarizing work because you need to learn it for the exam. And I think for every 10 pages that you see in a textbook, you must be able to summarize that on one page, and then you know that you're going to get through all your work before the exam. But sometimes your summary might be for other people, so just be aware of who it is that you are doing the summary for. So there is a process. The process works like this. You must look for clues in headings and in the table of contents. If ever there is a table of contents available, then please use it. If there is an outline and the outline is numbered, then use that in your precis, because that numbered outline really creates the format that you want to put your summary in. Read it with understanding. And then as you do that, you must identify the topic, and I'm going to talk about that just a little bit more. You identify the topic, you highlight or underline the key ideas under the topic, you reduce unnecessary words or ideas, and you eliminate the supporting ideas. Then you edit and check if it still makes sense, because it doesn't help you now have a summary that doesn't make sense. It must still make perfect sense. It must still be absolutely logical. And then you go and you reduce it to desired length. So how do we identify the topic? I said they quickly identify the topic. So how do you do that? Well, the topic is the thing that the article or the piece of writing or the chapter is about. That is the topic. Then you need to go and look for your main idea or your main ideas. What are they saying? What are the arguments that is used to persuade in this case, maybe? So I say that I've got argument 1 and argument 2, and if both of them are true, then I make a logical conclusion, and that's how your main ideas must also be set out. And then your supporting ideas will be the how, what, when, why, how much, and how many. Now, sometimes you need the supporting idea in your main idea for it to make sense, but sometimes you can just do away with the supporting idea. And remember that you are doing this in your own words. So if the words in the original piece of work that you are working with is complicated and you think that your audience might not understand it, then use a simpler word. So you are not just reading a piece and eliminating every fourth word. That is not a summary. That is confusion. So please don't do that. So follow this process. Look for the clues. Use a highlighter to underline the key ideas, and then you will be able to do it. In a later video, I will actually explain to you how this works in practice when I do a practical summary. Let's move on to the next slide. The editing of written material. Please, guys, edit and proofread everything that leaves your desk, whether it is for internal or for external customers. When something leaves your desk, it must tell a story, and the story it must tell is that the person who created this piece of written material was professional and is responsible and is a thinking person and somebody that I can trust. So what does editing entail? Editing means that you are checking the piece of work and improving its accuracy and clarity. But before you edit, you first have to proofread, because when you proofread, you are going to read and correct. Because it might be that as you were creating an email, for instance, you made a mistake. And in your mind, when you were thinking through the email, you didn't see the mistake, and now you look at it and you say, goodness, what did I do? So therefore you always proofread first and then you edit it so that it can be better than original. Remember, if you are going to write something short and in a concise way, you cannot just read it once. It's often way more difficult, and it takes a lot longer to write something in a short pointed paragraph than to be long-winded about it. So let's start on the right side there. When we talk about editing, the first thing that you do, and it's a simple thing, is you spell check and you make sure that you are following the correct dialect. So if you are sitting in South Africa and you are drafting an email for somebody in America, then maybe you need to change your default spell checker from British English to American English, and that will be better for the person who reads it on the other side. Make sure that you stick to the layout. So if you have a letter, make sure that you have a letterhead, that you stick to the right format, 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs only, that there's a date so that in case the guy prints it out on the other side and use the hard copy, that he can still see the date, and that you use the correct greeting, for that type of letter. Okay. So don't say Sharp John in the end when you have no idea who the person is that's reading it. Then use a more formal ending. Also, make sure that it is readable. So it must be clear and simple. It must be polite. It must be unclattered, and it must be brief. Please, you don't want to have a sentence that continues for 3 lines, because the person that's reading it is gonna lose the gist of what you are saying. Make sure that you use proper punctuation. Please do not use shortened words like you guys sometimes do when you are sending short messages to each other. The person on the other side might not be a person in your generation, might be an older or younger person. So make sure that you use full words, full sentences, that if a letter is supposed to be in capital or a word is supposed to be in capital, it is in caps, that you use the right marks and that you use the right spacing. And then lastly, just a note there on sentences and paragraphs. Keep one idea to one sentence, or a sentence per idea, and one paragraph per argument. Because remember, you want the person to be able to read what you've written and understand it immediately so that they are able to reply to it. Okay. Then persuasive writing. Now, persuasive writing is one of the main purposes of communication. Obviously, another reason we will write something or communicate at all is to express emotion or to maintain contact with the world, or sometimes just for pleasure, as in prose or in poetry. But in the workplace, it is primarily to influence others. So the effects of persuasive writing is to persuade, and when you persuade, you want someone to do something, either by reason or by charm. So if you want somebody to buy from you, you are either going to point out the benefits of your product, or you are going to play to the ego of the person and think that make them think that you think they are special and therefore they need your product or your service. Another way to persuade somebody is to manipulate or control someone. Now, that can be done cleverly or deviously. So that is, you write something, say, we live in a very dangerous times, and you never know when somebody is going to break in, so you need an alarm system. So that's quite manipulative, but it still has to be true. The basis of persuasion is, and that's what I say, that it is fact. It must be truth. It can be proved by experience or observation, as opposed to opinion, which is a belief that is not necessarily founded on certainty or proof. But then, say you don't have the facts, but you still want to persuade somebody, then you can say, it is my belief, it is my opinion that. And then if the person is able to relate with you, that might be enough to convince them to do whatever it is that you are trying to persuade them to do. And then at the end there, I've given you a little table, the difference between informative writing and persuasive writing. Informative writing is more factual, while persuasive writing will often be more biased. Informative writing is more precise. Persuasive writing is a little more vague. Informative writing is more neutral, and persuasive writing is more emotional. And then lastly, informative writing is more balanced and than biased. That's what I meant there, more balanced than biased, while persuasive writing can often be more biased. So just remember, there's also a thing in advertising that we call puffing. Now, puffing is not lying, but it is a little bit of an exaggeration. So you can say, I make the best pizzas in the world. Now, best and pizzas, uh, that's up to different people's individual taste. So you are actually allowed to make a comment like that. It shows that you have a lot of confidence in your product, in this case pizzas, and you want people to buy it.